Hello and welcome back for another local history story, or rather for the second half of the ongoing story of the Dundee Jailbreak in 1869. Now, you might remember that our two anti-heroes, Milton and Jenkins, the two thieves, they've just dug their way out of Dundee Jail. But they're still in the prison yard and they need to figure out how to get across the wall. And Milton, of course, he's still got his hands cuffed as well, so that's going to make it difficult. But again, Jenkins decided he was going to go exploring and find a point of escape for them. And again, you might remember that the side of the building on the corner, there was protruding stones, kind of every other stone jutted out a bit. So this made it nice and easy to climb up. And he clambered up to the edge of the roof and crept along there a bit and then leapt over to the top of the prison wall. And he went along to the gate. And at that point, Jenkins was thanking his lucky stars for the fact that they thought it was important to have a flagpole at the gate of the prison, because this meant there was a nice rope there just waiting for them to make use of it. And Jenkins took this rope from the flagpole and he shimmied back down, got Milton to come over, and he tied the rope around Milton's waist. And he held the other end of the rope in his teeth and clambered up to the top of the wall again. And then he got Milton to try and kind of walk up the wall with his feet while Jenkins was supporting and also hauling him up with the rope. And now they were both on top of the wall. Just a 30-foot drop between them and freedom. "There's nothing for it but to jump," Jenkins said, and they looked at each other and they took a deep breath and they leapt off. And Jenkins landed all right, but because Milton didn't have great balance with his arms bound, he fell into a heap and he cried out, "I've broken both my legs!" And Jenkins gave him a quick look over and was like, "I'm pretty sure it's just your toes. Come on, we've got to run." And so they sort of half ran and half limped towards the town, and they found an inn in East Milnes Wynd where Jenkins knew the landlady. So there they got a hatchet and they finally managed to smash Milton's handcuffs off, and they threw them into a mill pond nearby. So this was freedom. But they knew they weren't going to stay free for long if they were anywhere near the jail, or if they hung about anywhere that they'd been known to frequent before. So they took a couple of days' food from the inn and they made for the back of the law. And exhausted, they finally managed to get a few hours sleep hidden in a haystack there. And then they waited until the next night when they had cover of darkness again. And they made their way back into Dundee and got on with their respective lives as men on the run. But of course, by this point, the jailers had woken up. They'd seen the flagstones, they'd seen the hole in the prison yard. They knew something was going on. And the police were hot on their trail. They didn't want people to go about thinking you could just break out of Dundee jail and get away with it. And of course the means of their escape was quite obvious in retrospect, but it was not quite so obvious where they'd gone after they got out. The police did eventually find the smashed handcuffs in the mill pond, but after that they were struggling. So they put up a reward of £5 for any information that led to their capture. And sadly, it was at this point that Jenkins, being a bit better known among the criminals of Dundee, became dangerous for him rather than a help. Because a few days after they'd escaped, one of his old friends found the temptation too much. And he told the police that Jenkins had been lodging in Anfield Road. And this man, he got the money, but he also had to leave Dundee because he was known for having betrayed Jenkins, and he couldn't go anywhere without getting hissed insults and occasionally flying missiles thrown at him. So poor Jenkins, after kind of masterminding this escape plan, his freedom was short-lived. And he decided to try different tactics on his second time round in jail. He actually became a model prisoner, and he ended up getting 2 years and 8 months taken off of his sentence for good behaviour. But what about Milton? He was less well known, and this meant that he got a good bit further. He took the ferry to Newport, and he walked down through Fife until he reached Burnt Island, and then he got a place on a steamship that was going to Granton, and from Granton he went on to Newcastle, and from Newcastle he got work on a boat that was heading out to Spain. And his original plan had been to just settle in Spain where nobody recognised him at all, but the problem with that was he didn't speak Spanish and he didn't really know how to go about learning Spanish, so he struggled to get work there. And he ended up returning to England, and he got work in South Shields. And unfortunately for him, there were a few other Dundonians working in South Shields at that time, and one of them recognised his face. So the police were waiting for him at the shipping office, wondering when he would come to collect his pay. But rumour did get out to Milton before he went into the office, and he immediately got work on another boat sailing internationally. So that was another few months before he returned to British shores. But the following March, so nearly a full year after the jailbreak, which had taken place in April, Milton decided he'd be safe enough to go into the shipping office at Newcastle and ask if he could get his pay. But unfortunately, his face was too well known by this point, and they remembered him. And he was held back in the office until the police arrived to arrest him, and eventually it was back into Dundee jail for Milton as well. And the two of them both did have to serve out the rest of their sentences, definitely not in the same cell this time. And nobody actually knows what became of Milton after he served his sentence and was released. He kind of just melted back into anonymity. But Jenkins did remain kind of a wheel-count face around Dundee for some time, although he didn't quite go back to his old criminal ways. And eventually Jenkins was persuaded to tell the full story of how he and Milton managed to orchestrate this jailbreak. And it was actually a man called James Scrimgeour who got him to tell the story. James Scrimgeour was a local politician and charity worker and activist, and he was the father of the very well-known Neddy Scrimgeour. And this is how the story of Milton and Jenkins's Dundee jailbreak has come down to us now. So that is all we know about that story. But we will be back next week with something else for you. And also there's an event that I'd like to draw your attention to. If you are watching this when it comes out, then it'll be next week. So on the Wednesday 19th of August at 6 p.m. we have a Facebook Live event with the author James Robertson, who is going to be talking about his historical writing. So if you're interested in sort of history and how we kind of tell these stories, then that is definitely one that you will want to tune into. That is on Dundee Libraries' Facebook page. And thank you, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye.